Recently, I saw a meme compilation about metagaming, which made me think it's probably time to talk about metagaming finally. Make sure to check out Icebrick's article on Tabletop Builds 2 about the subject, because we pretty much agree with each other. Welcome to Pack Tactics, where metagaming and optimization is evil, and we like evil. Meta this, meta that. Have you ever met a game before? What does that even mean? I don't know. Let's start the video. The definition of metagaming that is commonly used in tabletop role-playing games is something like acting according to information the player possesses, but which their character does not. Metagaming is often seen as synonymous to bad play, something you should not do. It implies you ruin immersion at best, and at worst that you are cheating. That doesn't sound great, does it? But believe me, this is a very narrow perspective. Let me explain why. First off, it's just difficult to tell when something actually is metagaming or actually something a player might have figured out, even without prior knowledge and what the character should have figured out. A new player might use Firebolt on a troll for no other reason than it being on their character sheets, and discover the troll's weakness from there. Whereas an experienced player could get some nasty stares if they use it at all. Another part of the issue is that while you can feign ignorance and such, knowledge cannot be unlearned. What if you know you should avoid looking at a Medusa? Do you pretend to stumble around for a while? Ask for an ability check to act like you stumbled upon the information? Going out of your way to create the appearance of non-metagaming is in and of itself another form of metagaming. You're clearly acting in a way due to what you know, and not the character. Everyone knows what a Medusa is, by the way. You can find similar things in observable trends, in and out of character. Like beasts often have intelligence too low for hideous laughter, or undead being immune to charm or frightened conditions. Trying to play around that information for the sake of appearance can make the game less fun. And this, of course, can go the other way around. Your character might have more information than you have. The DM describes, narrates, or uses props to show off their world. But the DM not describing that the enemy is wearing heavy armor doesn't mean they aren't wearing heavy armor. Your character can tell easily, but your DM might neglect to mention it. This is not the fault of the DM for their air quote mistakes, but it's just something that happens. I've seen it many times. In general, it's just hard to tell if something should count as metagaming. And that is without taking into account that it might be metagaming of a desirable kind. But before we continue, it's ad time! Yay! This video is sponsored by the Divine Forge, Well of Ether. It's an over 300-page DM-friendly adventure for a level 6 to 9 party. Villages are being raided and burnt to the ground. Families are taken away for sacrifice. There's a blood ritual happening, and you have to stop it. The ritual is speeding up the aging of a green dragon. Time is ticking, you're only level 6 and a complete noob. The green dragon is leveling into an ancient one very quickly. He's optimizing. There are new monster stats, DM strategies, character motivations, and tactical play. This book also loves fully fleshed out bad guys, including their motives, fears, lore, artwork, and ideas of how to roleplay them. Not to mention there are new items, new spells, tailored music for your immersion, and much more. There's even a water encounter and new mechanics for large-scale battles. It's filled with tips and time-saving details. It guides you on how to reduce prep time and has plug-and-play locations. This is fantastic for both new and veteran DMs because they're offering you fantastic DM advice. And it's always valuable to learn from other DMs with good ideas. This is a passion project with a lot of charm and care. I love this. Link in the description and comments. The Kickstarter ends soon, so you better hurry. I highly recommend it. Check it out. Back to the video. A lot of things players do is actually just inherently metagaming. This is because we interface with our characters in the form of a game. While they presumably exist in the world with only rough approximations of the mechanics of the game, characters probably know that aura of protection is helpful to them. But do they get the difference between how it interacts with a fireball that includes a saving throw, or a scorching ray spell which does does not. Trying to determine what characters know becomes insanely messy, and especially if you start to police your party based on that. And that brings me to some examples of where metagaming makes for a better game. It's more fun for players if you accept a new character after a player's old character has died, instead of leaving them because you don't trust them or something like that. I've surprisingly seen and experienced a lot of that. It sucks every time. There's always a fight. I remember the first time it happened to me like 11 years ago. I'm planning on telling that story eventually. Something similar is that hogging the spotlight by going on long solo missions is also impolite, even if it would work in fiction. To bring it back to an earlier point, I actually believe that metagaming can create a better experience in certain scenarios. The purpose of a game mechanic is to provide additional points of interaction for gameplay. Let's look at the troll. They regain health at the start of their turn, except if they take acid or fire damage. If you have no idea about this mechanic, you are just whacking the troll more times until it finally dies. If you know it has this trait, the combat instead changes into trying to make the fight easier by finding ways to apply fire. Similarly, when fighting a basilisk, you get to do things like obscuring their sight or setting up a mirror, if you know how they function. Otherwise, these things might never come into play, and even with descriptions, not all players will understand their implications in mechanic terms, or even be aware that these are interactions at all. Now, don't get me wrong, this does not mean there shouldn't be any surprises at all, but in general, features you can react to and deal with are more fun and interesting than features that are completely mysterious. Interaction is more fun than non-interaction. Am I right? Trying too hard to prevent metagaming turns what could still be a more engaging fight where the players need someone to deal fire damage every round into a messy negotiation with the DM or players and their subjective idea of metagaming. The better outcome would just to let it slide. Fights are usually not worth it. For you DMs out there, if it was really something you didn't want the players to know, you could make the monsters less recognizable or reflavor it completely. To make battles interactive and interesting, let players know how monster features work as soon as appropriate, maybe upon first encounter, or with audio or visual cues, or maybe the first time the feature is used. You also might want to hide away the information behind a check. But you have to ask yourself if you actually like the outcome if the players fail. Take, for example, rock grubs. These worms can only be removed by dealing fire damage the turn after they hit you, or by curing the disease. Otherwise, you're gonna die. If you hide this behind a check, your player's character is basically doomed if they fail. Instead, you could tell the players something like, the rock grubs latch on and begin to burrow into your skin. You realize you have but a moment to burn them away before it'll be too late. This allows them to react. Sharing information even helps the DM keep track of intricacy of features, as a player can point out if they make a mistake, like letting a feature work without sight. In 4th edition, players were actually given descriptions of both abilities and how they would appear in the world, and in game terms for clarity. That brings me to the definition of metagaming. The term is often used in a less than useful way, and I think I prefer the definition Tabletop Builds brings up, which is used in every game outside of tabletop RPGs. The metagame is about things that transcend the actual rules of the game. A metagame is a set of rules and structures that lie outside of the rules of the game, but still affects the game. For example, in video games, it might be said that the metagame is not to use a particular character, even though they are powerful, because they are weak against the most popular characters. Decisions are being made based not just just on the game, but on the behaviors of other players. This has some overlap with the previous definition. For example, a character yelling, "There's no way that's a real ancient dragon, we're only level 3, fits both definitions. Using anything on your character sheet is never metagaming by this definition, as things like your hit points and spell slots are simply part of the game and the game's world itself. Considering those to be metagaming just makes the word a lot less useful. To end this video, let me just say there are of course limits that should be drawn in regards to metagaming. Not all of it is okay. Reading ahead in an adventure or looking up stat blocks to use that information in the current fight should only be done with table consent. However, that is not to say that players shouldn't be allowed to look at stat blocks or the DMG at all. If you look at spells and features that players have access to, many make use of stat blocks. Some examples include Wild Shape, Polymorph, Conjure Animals, True Polymorph, and so on. Then there's the possibility that a player might be a DM themselves. Or they like looking at stat blocks in their pastime. Or maybe they want to be a DM one day. None of that is an issue. It is only an issue when you're trying to subvert the game. For any good story, surprise and tension can be part of what makes them engaging as they highlight triumphs further. Knowing everything can definitely decrease fun if the correct choice is immediately obvious and leads to fewer interactions with the highlight of the encounter, especially if they are meant to be revealed organically. The good thing is that challenges in D&D are designed as part of a game with mechanics to abide by, which means that situations where knowing the encounter's gimmick would reduce enjoyment is more uncommon. Conclusion: metagaming as it's commonly defined is not a universal evil, nor does it have to break the immersion of the game. Rather than stopping the game in its tracks whenever a hint of metagaming is detected, games can be improved by letting it slide or even integrating it into the story, allowing players to respond to the game rather than acting blindly. End of video. Thanks again to Tabletop Builds. Check out the article. They deserve the credit for their work. I'm ready to go to bed now. Check out the Divine Forge, Well of the Ether Kickstarter. And if you like what you see, they hope to earn your support. The link is in the description and comments. And remember, the Kickstarter ends soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.